I'll be talking about noisy phase gates in geometric quantum computation. To this distinguished audience, and also in view of the talks we've had from Professor Anil Kumar and others, I really don't need to introduce you, I do not need to belabor the point of what quantum computation is, but just for completeness sake, I'll just mention a few points as relevant to the talk that I'm giving. The first point is that if you want to build a quantum computer, then you have a universal set of gates, that is to say an arbitrary unitary transform on n qubits. It is enough if we are able to perform these three gates, namely the phase gate whose action is as follows. So it adds a phase to the state 1, and then you have the Hadamard gate. For people familiar with optics, this corresponds to the pi/2 pulse, and then you have the 2 qubit conditional phase gate. So if we have the ability to make these operations on any 2 qubits, then we can rig these together and perform any SUN operation on log n number of qubits. So these two are sufficient for any SU2 operation, and this allows any 2 qubits to talk to each other. So I'll mostly be talking about what happens when you have an environment interacting with your quantum system. So if you have an environment talking to your quantum system, then it adds noise. So the nature of this noise, or the impact of this noise, is going to be to reduce the performance of the application of all these gates. The work we've done so far allows us to address this particular question, namely you have phase gates. So what happens when you have the effect of noise? Now there have been various paradigms for quantum computation. So I don't mean realization, but the way that you implement a quantum computation. You have the regular quantum computer, of course, and yesterday Professor Debu Goswami was talking about an adiabatic quantum computer. Yet another paradigm that's been suggested is a geometric quantum computer, or geometric quantum computation. So I'll briefly introduce what I mean by geometric phase and so forth. Now, it is one of the surprises of quantum mechanics that a very fundamental discovery, namely the existence of so-called geometric phase, was made as late as 1982. It's been studied to great depth, and I'll only be touching on the surface, just so much as is necessary for what I'm going to talk. And the idea about harnessing the geometric phase for quantum computation is that this effect just depends on the path that the quantum computer executes in the state space, and it does not depend on how fast, for example, it executes it. So it doesn't, in that sense, it's not a dynamic, but it's a geometric phase. So consider, for example, historically it was first discovered by Michael Berry in 1985. What he did was he considered a quantum system executing an adiabatic cycle. So I have a time-dependent Hamiltonian of a system, and this time-dependent Hamiltonian is parameterized by a certain number of quantities, and this quantity is made to go make a circuit in parameter space and return back to itself. So physically speaking, I return back to the same state, but the surprising thing that he found was that there is an added extra phase. To be precise, what he showed was that, so you start with an eigenstate of the system and you make a circuit and come back. So this is the expected thing, because in the adiabatic approximation, your quantum system remains always in the in the eigenstate of the instantaneous Hamiltonian. So at each point you pick up a phase which is proportional to energy. So you make a circuit and come back. So you expect that there is this dynamical phase. But what he found was that there was an extra phase, and that is what is now understood to be geometric phase. So at the time he did not relate it to the geometry. He just noted that there was a surprising extra phase that's got tagged on to the dynamical phase. Now, a quick idea of this would be as follows. Now, if we have a Hilbert space, then we know that any given quantum state is physically indistinguishable from a state with which I multiply an element of the group U1. That is to say, I just multiply a complex number. For all practical purposes, it's the same physical state. So in a way, you can think of it as a kind of a gauge freedom, but I really don't need to use such words for this purpose. So you can therefore, one can think of a projective map that takes us from Hilbert space to this space of physical states, or which is a ray. So each state here is an equivalence class of various quantum states that differ from each other only by a phase. So I can write down a state here in this parameter space, and it's related to my state in Hilbert space by a phase factor, and I can just plug that into the Schrodinger equation, and a simple algebraic manipulation allows me to write down an expression which is like this. So I therefore obtain a part which is the dynamical phase, and what is now understood, as I said, as a geometric phase. Now it's called dynamical phase because the Hamiltonian appears in it, and this is a non-dynamical phase, and it's called the geometric phase because it can be shown that this phase does not depend on the dynamics but only on the shape of this path in parameter space. Actually, this idea was then related, as I understand, a talk was given by Michael Berry in Raman Research Institute, and two scientists there pointed out that his work is connected to a work done in 1956 by Pancharatnam. The problem that Pancharatnam had posed was, given two vectors which are non-orthogonal, how do I assign a phase between them? One would like to write it, as A dot B. I can always read off a phase phi here, but then we know that this would be indeterminate because any given A could be replaced by an extra phase. So this phi would be totally indeterminate. On the other hand, the question is very well defined physically because I can take two non-orthogonal states and then keep on varying the phase between them continuously, and there will be a point at which the intensity is going to be maximum. So the question, what is the phase difference between two non-orthogonal states, is physically well defined. So the point therefore is, if I want to compare 2 points, two different states, then I would like to have a recipe for moving the state to the point where the other state is located and then read off the phase between them. But how do I know that the very fact of moving it does not introduce an extra phase? So we are really talking about transporting a vector in a curved space. So it turns out, following arguments given by Simon, B. Simon, etc. So the recipe that we want is for something called a parallel transport. So I want to transport a vector locally such that the infinitesimal rotation, does not have any phase with it. So there are no rotations locally with respect to the vector and the vector that's obtained by it by an infinitesimal movement on the state space. So this is the expression. So what we really want is this term, a suitable derivative, being made equal to 0. Clearly, a derivative defined by just Hilbert space by Schrodinger evolution is not sufficient because this quantity for a Schrodinger evolution is purely imaginary. So I add on an extra term which is now interpreted in the geometrical language as the connection. So in terms of Christoffel symbols, this is something like the Christoffel symbols in the language of Riemannian geometry. So I can then compute this factor, and this I interpret as a geometric phase. So it is, the point about it is that if my underlying state space is flat, right, then this derivative just goes down to this and I have a geometric phase that vanishes. On the other hand, this quantity will not evaluate to 0 but to this particular integral if my underlying space is curved. So when I make a circuit and come back, so it's not necessary to come back, but experimentally it's quite nice to think of it that way. So a non-vanishing GP signals that the underlying state space is curved. So as a simple example for calculating it, let me look at a vector which is given this way and its orthogonal vector which is given this way. In this case, therefore, I have a block sphere with theta giving my latitude and phi is my azimuthal angle. So phi will be my phase. I make a circuit over phi and come back to the same place. So I can just use the prescription that I mentioned earlier and I obtain the phase which is essentially this and get this and this. So notice that this is nothing but the solid angle which is subtended by this motion. So this is quite general, though in this specific case I have shown that the phase gate, I mean the geometric phase is half the solid angle that is subtended by the circuit which is made by the state. It's a quite general statement connected to the holonomy transformation in a curved Riemannian space. I will also bring to your notice the fact that so when I look at the orthogonal state here, it's the same as this, but it just acquires a plus sign. So this basic and simple idea is what we would like to use for a phase gate. So if you remember, what a phase gate does is it takes my 0 state to the state 0, but it takes a state 1 to the state 1 with an extra phase factor. So I will therefore be, so if I have a state, a 0 state and a 1 state, then I subject them to a transformation that makes a rotation and comes back. So the state 0 will pick up a phi gamma, a geometric phase gamma, and the state 1 will pick up a geometric phase which is minus gamma. So on the whole, a relative phase of 2 gamma will exist between the 0 state and the 1 state. So the point is, how do you get rid of this dynamical phase? So when I do this rotation, it not only picks up the phase gate, the geometric phase, but it also picks up a dynamical phase. So there's a very simple protocol. There may be other ways to do it, but the idea is to get rid of the geometric phase by basically doing a double circuitry. So what I do is I take from the state psi and go forward in the curve. So I then pick up a dynamic factor and also a dynamic phase and a geometric phase. Then I apply a pi pulse which essentially shifts this up state to a down state, and then I return back. Okay, now the fact that I have inverted it and I'm also going in the reverse curve, okay, two positives, two negatives in a sense make positive. So whereas this guy gets added up, I have these two factors in the case of geometric phase, which is not the dynamical phase, which is not sensitive to the direction of the curve. So the end, depending on these two states, what I get here is that as far as the geometric phase is concerned, they they should have opposite sign. Whereas these two, the dynamical phase just factors out as a harmless global phase, but the geometric phase, there should be a plus sign here, survives as a relative phase between these two. So the point therefore is that I can use this idea of a geometric phase to implement a phase gate for a quantum computer which is based on geometric phases, which is what I've called as a geometric quantum computation, or which is called holonomic quantum computer. As a quick note, I would also mention that what we've been talking so far is only the abelian geometric phase. So it assumes that there is no degeneracy. Supposing I'm doing an adiabatic evolution of the system and I have degeneracy in the system. So when I come back to the old state space, I don't just pick up an extra phase factor, but there is a rotation within the degenerate subspace. So that is basically called the non-abelian holonomy. So there's a general way to calculate it. I think so yeah, so in terms of, this is the connection as I earlier said. So you have the equivalent of a Christoffel symbol. So this is what I get. I can integrate this over this and then I obtain the geometric phase, the point I mentioned earlier. Okay, a very brief history of GP is that we can actually trace it back to Pancharatnam's work in the context of purely classical optics, where he gives us a method for assigning a relative phase between two non-orthogonal states. And then Berry discovers geometric phase in the quantum context in the case of a cyclic adiabatic evolution. So as I said, one can look upon it basically as a geometric effect, which has nothing to do with classical or quantum mechanics, but it's just that here we are exploiting it for implementing quantum gates. And then the geometric nature of it was shown by B. Simon, and it was generalized to the non-adiabatic evolution and non-cyclic, etc. So one by one people started understanding. It took quite a while to understand that it's a basic geometric effect. We did not need things like adiabaticity or the cyclicity, etc. So I think then Mukunda and R. Simon then pointed out, I think they were probably the people to first understand it in all clarity, and they pointed out that it's essentially a kinematic effect. And afterwards, geometric phases were defined for non-degenerate mixed states undergoing unitary evolution. And then afterwards, you had degenerate mixed states undergoing unitary evolution. The last in the most recent advancement is that you're able to assign a geometric phase to a mixed state undergoing a non-unitary evolution. So you have an open system. So the prescription that they have given is what I will be following. So A quick overview is that we will study geometric phase of a two-level system interacting with different kinds of system bath interactions. The first we'll be looking at is an environment which is a quantum noise kind of an environment, in the sense that it does not exchange energy with the system, but it only decoheres it. Afterwards, we'll also be looking at dissipative interactions, that is to say there is both loss of energy and loss of phase information. So throughout we will deal with a very general kind of a bath, which is squeeze thermal bath, and we'll only be looking at the very specific problem of what kind of problem or nuisance is created by these environments on this on the implementation of a phase gate. I did not figure out a way to get rid of various equations here, but you can actually ignore the details, and the basic concepts is what we'll need. So we have a generic quantum non-demolition open quantum system. What we mean by a quantum non-demolition open quantum system is that the Hamiltonian is, I have a system Hamiltonian, and I have a Hamiltonian for the reservoir, and I have a system, and this is the interaction Hamiltonian which couples these two. So the telltale mark of a QND or a quantum non-demolition setup is that the system Hamiltonian commutes with the system environment Hamiltonian. Okay, so as a result we'll have a variety of simplifications, and I'll just go through it quickly. You don't need to get bogged down by the basic details. So as you know, this is the usual thing. So I have the initial state of the system and the environment, which are assumed to be separable, are evolved by this joint Hamiltonian. I will assume that the very general idea that the reservoir or the environment is started as a thermal squeezed bath. So a thermal bath, for example, is that you have a thermal distribution of photons in each of the modes, and this is the squeezing operator. Okay, so this is the basic idea. So after I have evolved the Hamiltonian through this, I obtain a final reduced density operator which has this particular form. I think the nice thing about a quantum non-demolition this thing is that I have not yet put the specification of what my environment is, right? So that part alone is left, and now I'll start plugging those details. So we'll be just looking at two quantum non-demolition setups. So we'll be looking at two-level systems with the quantum QND interaction with the bath. Okay, first is a bath of harmonic oscillators, and then a localized bath of two-level systems. So, okay, the system Hamiltonian is always taken as a sigma 3 operator. This is just the same thing in the spinorial language. So basically I'm saying that the up and down states are eigenstates of the sigma 3 or the sigma z operator. Okay, you just need to think about the following fact, which is quite generic for a quantum non-demolition experiment. So remember, as I said, that there is no loss of energy from the system into the environment. What is lost is just phase information, and that is reflected in this reduced density operator. So I have these two terms which remain, so the diagonal is unaffected, but you see that as time increases, the off diagonal terms fall exponentially fast. So this succinctly captures the idea of how the quantum system becomes classicalized as time progresses, right? So you put time infinity and only the diagonal terms survive. What we'll do is we'll look at an initial state which is given in the following way. And this is the prescription that comes from Tong et al., who allow us to calculate, assign a geometric phase even for a non-unitary evolving mixed state. So we'll consider GP for a quasi-cyclic path where time varies from 0 to 2 pi by omega. We say quasi-cyclic because if it's a mixed state, it will not return back to the original position. It will just go into the block sphere because it becomes increasingly mixed as time progresses. So the basic idea here is that I look at rho t, the instantaneous reduced density operator of my system. I compute its eigenvalues, and so I form, so if this is, let's say I have a two-dimensional system, so k runs from 0 and 1. So I take this dot this, and these are the two systems. I sum this from k equal to 1 to 2. And so these are the initial and the final eigenvalues for these two states, which are parameterized in this fashion. As I said, I really didn't know how to simplify these things, but the end of the story is that we obtain an expression which looks like this. Actually, going back to this, you can intuitively understand it as follows. Supposing I have a purely mixed state evolving unitarily. So what happens when I try to find the eigenstates of it, it will basically, it will be single dimensional, right? So it will have a support in only one dimension. So this summation will be over only one entry. So you just have one entry over it. And when I complete the circuit and come back, so the eigenvalue will be 1. When I complete the circuit and come back, I come back to the same state. So this also gives me 1. So this is the only expression which I have, which you will recognize is the geometric phase. Right? So when I take the argument of this expression, I pick up precisely the geometric phase. So we have an expression that reduces to the usual geometric phase for a pure state evolving unitarily. So I think an expression of this kind is best understood diagrammatically. I will just point this out that it's useful, intuitively it's useful to try to interpret the diagrams that we get in terms of this. So we've been talking about, I mentioned earlier a paper by Schuquist and others who give us a prescription for computing the geometric phase for a mixed state that's evolving unitarily. And the point that they make is that this is the GP that they come up with. Again, the way to understand it is to go to the unitary limit. Now L is the length of the block vector. Okay, so if you have a pure state, then L is 1, so these two cancel each other, and you have omega by 2 minus omega by 2, which is precisely half the solid angle which is subtended by a circuit. So you have the usual GP. So in case you have a mixed state, then of course L remains fixed because I have a unitary evolution of a mixed state, so L remains fixed throughout, and you get this. Now again, the only message that you need, you can forget all the details that I talked to you about. So if I have a quantum non-demolition measurement, that is, I have a non-dissipative decohering environment, then what happens is in the block vector picture, what you find is that the x component and the z component are increasingly getting shrunk. This quantity lambda starts with 0, in which case you're completely pure state, and then they vanish, but only this guy survives, the z component survives. So it's as if I have the block sphere, I start it, I switch on a QND interaction, they keep getting compressed until they get compressed along the sigma x axis. So that is the action of quantum non-demolition interaction. So the idea here, so we now look at GP, so this can directly be read off to tell how the implementation of a phase gate based on a geometric computation is going to be. So you can see here that, okay, I've started off, these are various initial states. I start with the parameter theta, you can think of it as a latitude if you like, right, on the block sphere. So various thetas, so this is the unitary evolution, right, the outermost curve, and what we have done is for various thetas, we keep increasing the coupling strength to the environment. So what we find is that as the strength of coupling to the environment increases, there is a suppression of the geometric phase to a greater and greater extent. What we have not put here is that you can increase the temperature of the environment, so make the environment more noisy, you can increase the squeezing of the environment, or you can increase the coupling constant. In each case we find that there is this suppression of the geometric phase, and as you allow time to keep increasing, the suppression goes towards 0. I mean, there is a complete suppression. So what we find is that if you have a noisy environment, then the performance of your your phase gate is affected in this fashion. I'll probably skip this. So the only difference here to the thing that earlier, the previous thing that I just shown you was an environment modeled as a bath of harmonic oscillators, but here we're looking at an environment modeled as a bath of two-level systems. Really speaking, except in the quantitative details, qualitatively there is nothing much different here. Okay, except perhaps that earlier the off-diagonal terms were dying off exponentially fast, but here they just fall off polynomially. So even these pictures that I've got here they pertain to a bath of harmonic oscillators, because qualitatively there's no difference between these two systems, whether the environment is modeled as a bath of harmonic oscillators or as a bath of two-level systems. So here again what we find is we look at geometric phase for 3 initial states, and we increase temperature here, and what we find is that as temperature increases, the geometric phase, it just dies out. So as temperature increases, it's not really counterintuitive. So the effect of the environment is to kill the geometric phase and thereby completely undermine the performance of a phase gate. So in this case, we have without squeezing, and here we have the environment which has been squeezed. So what we find here, and this point might be worth remembering because we find a completely opposite picture in the case of a dissipative environmental interaction, is that having squeezing actually makes the situation worse. So I mean, you can see from the ordinates that if I have I increase temperature and with squeezing, then the reduction in geometric phase is even more. That is, the effect of noise is even more marked. Here, the second kind of environment that we'll be looking at is the geometric phase of a two-level system in a non-QND interaction with a bath. So what we mean by this is that there's both energy exchange and also quantum information is also being lost into the environment, but over and above that there is an energy loss. So we have a non-QND interaction with the bath composed of harmonic oscillators. We look at two cases. Again, I'll probably just skip this because qualitatively there's nothing different from what was given here. So the system interacting with the bath initially in a squeezed thermal state in the weak coupling Von-Markov approximation. So you can start with this sort of an interaction between the environment and the system. No need to go into those details. And this is a standard reduced density operator that you can get from any standard textbook on open quantum systems like Breuer and Petruccione. So we have that equation where your sigma plus and sigma minus, basically in the language of quantum computation, you can look they are the raising and the lowering, atomic raising and lowering operators. And one thing we discovered, which is probably known, is that they can actually be manifestly put in the Lindblad form. So these are really Lindblad equations. Just mark these quantities. I'll come back to this. So again, I think the take-home message is this. So I have, these are my block vector equations. So what we're looking at is, I have a qubit which is initially in a pure state, and it's talking to the environment and gradually evolving. So we then parameterize the effect, this effect in terms of time t, and we're looking at what happens to the block vector. So what you find here is that as far as the sigma x part, I mean the lambda x, however you call it, so in the block picture, so you find that the x part and the z part, the y part are dying out exponentially fast. So you can see that as t tends to infinity, these parts die out, but the only one that survives, okay, is going to be a term which is 1 by 2n plus 1. Now this quantity n, which was shown in the previous page, no need to worry about the details, but the point is, if my environment is at 0 temperature, then this quantity is 0. So the asymptotic state that I have will be a state which is given by 0, 0 and minus 1. And if my environment is at temperature t equal to infinity, okay, then this quantity also vanishes. So I have 0, 0, 0 here. So the idea is that I have, no matter what state you start from, if you have a dissipative kind of interaction, at the end of the day, for sufficiently long time, your qubit goes and sits at the center of the blocks here. That is to say, it becomes maximally mixed. So your environment is totally messed up with the system. But the interesting thing is that if your environment has temperature 0, then no matter what state you start with, you increasingly tend to a state which is the south pole of your block sphere. Again, I present these pictures only because it gives us an intuitive way to interpret the effect of the environment. So here again, we have this is without squeezing, any squeezing of the environment, and so this is without squeezing, and we have squeezing here for various values of theta. Now we notice that, as I said, the effect of this environment is that it goes to one asymptotic fixed state which is present on the sigma z axis. So if one starts from the south pole, which is given by theta naught is equal to pi, then we don't pick up any geometric phase, because as I said, it starts from that point and it evolves within the axis, right within the point. So if we want to loosely interpret, if you wish to relate geometric phase as in some sense proportional to the amount, to the quantity of solid angle that has been subtended by the path that is executed by the qubit during its interaction with the environment, then we see that any state that starts, okay, from within the sigma x axis should not acquire any geometric phase. An exception to this, of course, is certain state 0. So they also start in the sigma z axis in the north pole, but we find that they acquire certain finite phase. Without going to the details, what we find is that the cases where, okay, this happens is when the gamma naught is sufficiently large that even within one cycle, the asymptotic state has come to the south of the Bloch sphere. Okay, so as a result, what happens is that even though you start with a state which is there, and even though it comes across the sigma z axis, it is forced to cross the center of the Bloch sphere, and we find that it picks up a geometric phase because of that. So again, the interesting fact, probably the take home message here might be that when we switch on squeezing, then it slightly opposes the effect of temperature effects. So we can see here that this is the effect without squeezing, but when I switch on squeezing, there's a slight hump here. So there are certain portions over which the reduction in geometric phase because of environmental effects seem to be suppressed. Okay, this is brought out more prominently here. I mean, this figure which we reproduce turns out to be exactly what was obtained by Zanardi and I think Rossetti. So what they have essentially shown is you have the effect of temperature and you have the geometric phase here. And as temperature increases, so the effect of noise becomes stronger and stronger, we have a fall in the geometric phase. But with squeezing, we find that there is this plateau which is formed. So in contradistinction to the case of the QND interaction where squeezing was actually messing up, adding to the noise, here we find that actually having squeezing rather counterintuitively in some sense puts off the noisy effect of the environment. So therefore these narrow peaks become broad plateaus in this case. So right, a similar pattern. This is for one set of initial states, this is for another set of initial states, is what we've got. Okay, this is a simplified Jaynes-Cummings model. So here again we have a dissipative interaction between your quantum system and the environment. Here I have a two-level system put in a cavity, but the cavity is a leaky cavity. So the cavity is talking to the environment, and we can then set up an effective Hamiltonian by getting rid of the cavity modes. I will also skip this because again qualitatively we do not obtain anything that's much different than in the case of the Born-Markov approximation. Okay, I'll just come to the last part of my talk. The idea was to connect it to noisy processes familiar to quantum information theorists. So we know that there are various ways in which you can harm quantum information, essentially because of interaction with the environment. We have what is called the phase damping channel, where you where only the phase is killed. Okay, and then you have the amplitude damping channel that I'll be talking about. So if you use the operator sum representation, so the action of a superoperator E, okay, due to environmental interaction can be thought of as follows. So I have the environment started in a separable state, with this being the environmental state initially, and this is the density operator of the system. So they together interact according to some unitary operation U, and then I trace out the environment. So this effect can immediately be written down in the form of these Krauss operators, which satisfy, which are in fact a partition of unity. But one assumption here is that the environment starts initially in a separable state with the system. So these are my Krauss operators, and they form a partition of unity. So any transformation representable as an operator sum is a completely positive map. Okay, now, so in quantum information, we know that there is a channel which is called the phase damping channel, or the completely dephasing channel, whose Krauss operator elements can be given according to this form. So if you remember the initial state that we had written, that was cos theta 2 by 2 ket 0 plus e power I phi 0 and ket 1. So if I apply these elements according to this prescription, okay, according to this prescription, if I apply this, so the state that I get looks like this. So it's not difficult to see that this corresponds physically to a quantum non-demolition interaction in the following sense, that the diagonal elements remain unaffected, which says that the energy in the quantum system is not lost, but the phase information becomes lost because it's increasingly damped out by this 1 minus lambda root term. One can physically make a connection by actually writing down this. So if I have the environment interaction modeled as a bath of harmonic oscillators, then this damping constant, okay, it turns out to be this. And if I have a bath of two-level systems, and it turns out that the Born-Markov interaction can be represented by what is familiar, the noise channel which is familiar to quantum information theorists, and which is called the generalized amplitude damping channel. So you have a generalized amplitude damping channel. You can capture its action by means of 4 of these Krauss operators. And if you have temperature is 0, then P turns out to be 1. So you just need one of these channels. So this vanishes. And here again what we find is that if you look at the initial state which is given by this, application of these Krauss operators produces it's a noisy channel, and the effect is to create this. Again, by comparing it with the detailed model that we've got of a system interacting dissipatively with a bath of harmonic oscillators, we find that we obtain the amplitude damping channel if we make the following associations. So I guess the take-home message is that if I have a dissipative interaction in the Born-Markov approximation, okay, or the Jaynes-Cummings model, then it gives you a physical realization of what in quantum information we call as an amplitude damping channel. Whereas if I have a quantum non-demolition sort of an interaction with the environment, it realizes what is called as a phase damping channel. Of course, if this would be, as I said, if you have an amplitude damping channel, the characteristic is that you have an unique asymptotic state. And for temperature is equal to 0, I have P equal to 1, and so it goes, you have a, so the asymptotic state is pure. But if you have a finite temperature, right, then your asymptotic state is mixed. And if the environment's temperature is infinite, then it can actually be shown that P equal to half. So you have a maximally mixed state. So this concludes my talk, and the point that I try to bring across is that you can have a quantum computer realized by using this holonomic technique, and since we have a prescription for computing geometric phase even for mixed states undergoing non-unitary evolution, so we have these kind of interactions which can be identified with a generalized amplitude damping channel and a phase damping channel, and they have these effects that I just described to you. So the news is that there is nothing new, namely that if you have an environment, then it kills your ability to quantum compute.